Imagine a king so terrified of being poisoned that he spent his entire life swallowing poison.
Imagine an emperor who drank poison every single day, not in a fantasy story, but in real life. His name was Mithridates VI, a king so terrified of death that he waged a lifelong war against his own body. He wasn't just afraid of assassins. He was obsessed with conquering poison itself. He forced himself to swallow arsenic and venom. He created a so-called universal antidote that would be famous for centuries. He even threw poison parties, testing his bizarre potions on condemned criminals just to see if they worked. But here's the brutal twist. In the end, the man who tried to become immortal died in the most ironic way imaginable by failing his own experiment. His quest for invincibility became his ultimate trap. Today, we're rediving into the tragic obsession that consumed one of Rome's greatest enemies and changed the course of history. This isn't just a story about a paranoid king. It's a story about what happens when the fear of dying becomes more dangerous than death itself. The story begins with a trauma that would haunt Mithridates for the rest of his life. At just 14 years old, he watched his own father die, not in a heroic battle, but at a banquet, slumped over a plate, a victim of poison from an unknown hand. In a single night, the young prince inherited a throne, a kingdom teetering on the edge of chaos, and a crippling, all-consuming paranoia. His thought process was simple and terrifying. Anyone, at any time, could be trying to kill him. Trusting no one, he fled the royal court and disappeared into the wilderness. For years, he lived like a fugitive, surviving off the land. He wasn't just hunting for food. He was studying. He learned about every herb, every root, every venomous creature he could find. He wasn't just learning to survive. He was learning to master the very thing that had killed his father. This period in the wild transformed his fear from a simple instinct into a calculated, scientific obsession. When he finally returned to reclaim his throne, he wasn't just a king. He was a self-taught toxicologist, ready to turn his body into a living laboratory. Back in his palace, Mithridates saw threats everywhere. Every cup of wine, every shared meal, every handshake could be a vessel for his demise. He concluded that the only way to be truly safe was to become completely poison-proof. And so began his bizarre and dangerous daily ritual. He started ingesting small, sublethal doses of the deadliest poisons known at the time: arsenic, hemlock, snake venom, and dozens of other toxins. Day by day, he would methodically increase the dosage, pushing his body to its absolute limits, forcing it to build a tolerance. But he wasn't just blindly swallowing poisons. This was a highly scientific, albeit insane, endeavor. He surrounded himself with a team of shamans, physicians, and specialists from across the ancient world. Their one and only job was to help him concoct antidotes to counteract the poisons he was taking. This led to the creation of his legendary formula, the Mithridateum, a complex recipe rumored to contain dozens of ingredients. To perfect this antidote, his experiments grew even more macabre. He used condemned prisoners as human guinea pigs. He would force them to drink a poison, then give them a version of his antidote to see if it worked. If the prisoner survived, the formula was a success. He would then, in a display of power and supposed invincibility, drink the exact same poison in front of his entire court to prove his immunity. Some accounts even say he experimented on animals, like ducks, feeding them toxins and then studying their bodies to see which herbs or natural substances might have protected them. Mithridates was blurring the line between self-preservation and madness, turning his court into a theater of toxicology. While Mithridates was deep in his world of poisons and antidotes, a shadow was growing on the horizon: the Roman Republic. Rome was expanding, and Mithridates' kingdom of Pontus stood directly in its way. This ignited the Mithridatic Wars, a series of bloody conflicts that would span decades. But Mithridates wasn't just a king. He was a warlord who brought his unique expertise to the battlefield. He weaponized his obsession. He used poison not just for defense, but for offense. His armies were known to poison Roman supply lines, contaminating their food and water sources to weaken them before a battle. He was one of the first military leaders to employ chemical warfare on a large scale, using his knowledge to create toxic arrows and other deadly projectiles. He was as much a toxicologist as he was a general, making him one of Rome's most unpredictable and feared enemies. But as his war with Rome escalated, so did his paranoia at home. The man who trusted no one now suspected everyone. He saw conspiracies in every shadow. He grew convinced that his own family, his friends, and his closest advisors were plotting to kill him, just as they had his father. His court, once a place of power, became a cage of suspicion and fear. He executed allies on the slightest whim, and his obsession with poison had ironically poisoned his entire life, isolating him completely. He was winning battles against poison, but losing the war for his own sanity. After decades of fighting, the tide finally turned. The great Roman general, Pompey the Great, cornered Mithridates. His armies were defeated, his kingdom was collapsing, and his own son had betrayed him, leading a rebellion, with Roman legions closing in and no escape left. The king, who had spent his entire life defying death, decided it was finally time to embrace it. He gathered his family, and, in a final, tragic act, he administered a deadly poison. His wives and daughters died. Then, Mithridates took his own dose of the very same potent cocktail he had perfected over a lifetime. He waited for the end. And then, nothing happened. The poison didn't work. His body, which he had so painstakingly trained and hardened against every known toxin, had become too immune. The very shield he had built to protect himself from death now prevented him from choosing it. In that moment of ultimate irony, his life's work had failed him in the most cruel way imaginable. Defeated and unable to die by his own hand, he had to turn to a loyal servant or bodyguard and beg to be killed. According to the histories, he was impaled on a sword. The man who had tried to become a god died a very human death, a victim not of poison, but of his own success. His obsessive quest to control his own fate had, in the end, robbed him of his final choice. Even after his dramatic death, the legend of Mithridates lived on. His famous universal antidote, the Mithridateum, became one of the most sought-after medicines in the ancient world. For centuries, physicians in Rome and later in Europe kept versions of this complex formula in their pharmacies, believing it could cure any poison. It was the stuff of legend, a testament to his obsessive genius. His legacy is also embedded in our language. The very term Mithridatism is used today to describe the practice of building immunity to a poison by taking gradually increasing doses. It's a scientific principle named after a paranoid king. Ultimately, the story of Mithridates VI is a profound and tragic lesson. He dedicated his life to conquering mortality, to waging war on death itself. But in doing so, he became a prisoner of his own fear. His obsession didn't save him. It consumed him. He turned his own body into a battleground and, in the end, lost a war against himself. Mithridates, the Poison King, proved that trying to escape death at all costs can sometimes lead to a fate worse than the one you were trying to avoid. If you found this dark tale of power, paranoia, and biological hubris as fascinating as I did, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories. Let me know in the comments, which historical figure's secrets should we uncover next? Thanks for watching.